as indicated, unfortunately, Emma has been taken away on bereavement leave and is unable to present today. But we do have an steed, Melissa Burr, who has kindly stepped into this position and is going to share her presentation, which she presented. I think, did you present down at the Southern Regional Hui? You did, Melissa. Well done. So she's going to be presenting student learning and wellbeing in the age of AI. And I'm just going to hand it over to you. I'm going to stop my share. And that allows you, Melissa, to be able to share your PowerPoint. And just leaving it over to you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Apologies, I'm having that tech moment of panic. We're looking for the right button.
We know that feeling. We had a few of those this morning.
Oh, yeah. We make it work. I think here we are. Are you all able to see if I go into... Okay, go into presenter mode then. From beginning, and audio is okay?
Well, audio is very good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And yes, thank you all for inviting me to come today and share this presentation. Emma's doing incredible work, and I do hope that you'll will be able to meet her and hear more about what she's doing at another time as well. But I'm excited to share with you this presentation today. Just a little about me to introduce myself and what I have prepared. I work right now as a casual learning advisor at the Academic Skills Center at University of Canterbury. I have previous experience teaching and lecturing and working in a tutoring role in kind of an analog in the States, so our writing center, which was similar to a learning advisor role here. But in that part-time capacity, I did what I could to do a literature review of what is around currently with generative AI, and if and how and in what ways this impacts tertiary learners' well-being. I'll share more on this in a moment, but it's been a sudden shakeup within our educational settings, and so it's important to start bringing those learnings together so we can make some informed decisions, particularly those that spotlight students' perspectives. We don't want to be making decisions about them without them. And much of the research right now is a bit on the theory side and not so much bringing their voices and experiences to light. And then within our context, considering how this can inform our work in learning advisement and student support. And just as a bit of positionality, is that previous teaching experience, and in particular, I think what made me interested in this topic is teaching online in 2020 to 2023. In the States, it was a rapid and somewhat uncoordinated switch to online, hybrid, in-person learning that really brought out a lot of the existing challenges that were already there and presented new challenges. And I see a bit of potential for this to also be occurring now with the introduction of teaching with GenAI. And I think what really impacted me too is seeing how students were already facing lots of institutional and instructional barriers that were often exacerbated for our most vulnerable learners within this rapidly changing environment. So hopefully we can take some of those lessons learned, start considering their voice and experiences sooner, and co-create some solutions that can work for all of us across our institutions, which I've outlined in more detail here. Got ahead of myself a bit. Yes. Looking at these sudden technological changes that affect the entire learning community and connecting with the theme of this WHOI as well with us as practitioners, it impacts us too, and particularly how we can support students and how we can take care of ourselves as we negotiate our relationships with this new tech and how we see it affecting us. So just a quick overview of the current research landscape, again, that I found in my very part-time capacity, not particularly my area of expertise other than youth well-being and education for my PhD work right now. But we saw an uptick in GenAI academic literature and research in 2023 when ChatGPT was more broadly launched and expanded. Much of this research, though, focuses on academic impacts and technological potential for instruction rather than what students themselves are experiencing and going through. So certainly opportunity to do some more research and exploration of that. I also found that a lot of the literature that does exist uses a lot of closed-ended questions and surveys, which of course have their place for getting large amounts of data, and it can be a quick way to take a poll of what people are going through. But it does kind of pre-select what people are able to say because they can only push a radio button rather than having a more open-ended discussion or interview or focus group. So while there was a blend of both, it does seem like there is more open-ended exploration needed. And they're often small sample size from very different places. And we know that culture and institutions are important contexts for coming to conclusions. So hopefully we can see more local and applicable research yet to come. I'm going to do my best to contextualize what I found, particularly looking at young people, as that's my background in my current research, looking at young people studying climate and environmental and sustainability subjects. So another big tech and societal topic to talk about. But even within this field, we're seeing this construct of youth as being dependent on age, being re-examined. So really looking at a lot of this youth research can apply to the student context as well. In the dynamic of student versus teacher, tutor, whatever the situation might be, it's often positioned as a more marginalized identity without the same amount of leverage, control, decision-making power. And so just keeping in mind that that can be some of the tension and dynamic within these relationships. It can lead to their voice and perspective being ignored or dismissed. So any time that in our work we can create opportunities for choice, self-efficacy, and autonomy in education, we can better support their well-being. And in this young people or student role bracket, this is a time when people tend to be inherently future-focused. When they're in educational settings, they're learning more, so it can take them to their next step. They're thinking about how they can impact society, finding purpose in work, and particularly for younger Congo, they want adults to be thinking about the future and that long-term lens, immediate, as well as medium and long-term impacts of decisions that are being made today that are going to affect people as they move forward. Also, job and career preparedness, very important at this time, and we know that's being very core to their thinking right now, and it is very much being affected by generative AI. And here in 2025, we're operating in this context of polycrisis. There's a lot more uncertainty and instability, the rapid and sudden change. So important to protect our well-being in times like this. And yes, similar to during COVID time and that sudden technological and education switch, existing inequities can be further compounded by these changes. And those that have more exposure to negative consequences and impacts. Here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, mental health and well-being of youth is already sadly precarious as it is around the world right now, those polycrisis conditions in mind. There's also the specific needs of student identities, and they often have overlapping identities. I share this link of interest for international student well-being, and that might be a helpful resource for you all too. But each of these different identities that people hold might have particular needs. And while our expertise might not be in mental health, it certainly does impact their ability to learn and their education experience within their institutions. So while absolutely to refer out to experts for acute mental health, and well-being throughout our settings, it's also inevitably going to impact us in our role. And so the rest of this will be thinking more about that learning and educational context. I might be using terms like teacher, educator, instructor, tutor a bit interchangeably, and I want to acknowledge that there's a range of roles here in terms as well, but just thinking in broad terms about that academic support and learning and student role. And the first resource that I'm excited to share is this podcast that I can't recommend enough. This is with author Rebecca Winthrop, and she recently looked at learners, and her research categorized them into these 4 modes: resistor mode, passenger, achiever, and explorer mode. Resistors and passengers being a bit disengaged, somewhat checked out of learning. Achievers really learning for accomplishment's sake, and explorers who are learning out of a place of curiosity. Each of these are intersecting with AI a bit differently and has the potential for those less engaged students to kind of hack the system. She talks about how students report other students taking work, putting it through 3 different AIs, a text humanizer, and sprinkling in some typos so they can submit as their own work without engaging with material. So it has that potential, but there's also potential for it to support self-directed learning and help those who might have other life responsibilities, time constraints, care responsibilities at home. You know, a lot of us are very resource constrained at the moment, and so there's opportunities for supporting students there. She also brought on, or rather the podcast host brought on 2 student perspectives. This was an op-ed. I'm a high schooler, and AI is demolishing my education. Not mincing words there, being very direct, that talks about how it was difficult for her to watch her peers submit work like this when she really was looking forward to engaging with critical discussion. They were talking about Frederick Douglass in class, and it was things that she really wanted to explore. And it's compromising their sense of social cohesion as students and what they typically go through when some are kind of on this AI tech route, while others might not be so sure. Second team was actually helping develop tools. But she too acknowledged both the benefits and the downsides. Some of student perceived usefulness this is a bit of an older study, and I do think, I meant to say this earlier, keeping in mind that 2023 is really when research began. I tried to just look at 2025 studies since things are moving so quickly. And again, taking place in disparate areas with small samples. This is a group in Romania, but we see these themes throughout more recent literature too. Most students at this beginning in 2023 were approaching AI with curiosity, but there are trouble with fear, indifference, and trust as well, and how that affects their learning. Most attitudes and beliefs were relatively positive toward GenAI and optimistic, but there are some specific concerns looking with that future orientation toward expense, resource intensiveness. That's bullet point number 3. The job losses and replacing people at work. This was the Likert 1 to 5 scale, so above that midpoint at 3.4. Very some dehumanization. I then looked at AI's usefulness, and all students gave it at least a 2 ranking, with that bar chart on the left side of the screen. So nobody gave it a 0 or a 1. All students saw a degree of usefulness, but they grouped these usefulness categories, and the highest ranked things that students were looking at with AI when it comes to learning with universal access and how it could help all students. Students were also positively responding to AI with evaluation and being able to receive constant feedback. I also like the idea that it could offer virtual assistant to teachers who might not be available for questions after class or after hours, or when they were writing their assignment the night before it was due. And then they also recognized the strongest disadvantage, potentially diminishing interpersonal connection. And this early studies themes really carried through throughout the more recent work as well. So this study was conducted with 482, so a much bigger sample. They are also finding that the biggest reason students are turning to AI is to support with asking questions so they can increase their competency and confidence, as well as receive feedback they might not otherwise be able to get. Something that had stood out here was this idea that GenAI offers on this table 5, the top 2 lines, that AI will not judge me, and so they feel more comfortable using it. There's another 1 to 5 ranking, and that's nearly 4. GenAI is useful for student support due to anonymity. They don't want to be judged, and they want a little more privacy to maybe ask some embarrassing questions, or might feel shame or judgment when they come to a human support person. Something we can keep in mind in our roles. This study also similarly found that feedback, study support, and instruction continue to be the top reasons that students are looking to use GenAI to help them in their learning, and that academic integrity, as well as accuracy, are repeatedly those most common concerns. This study with PIPS also shared some student quotes. So again, adding that more open-ended dimension. It's always nice to hear from student voices directly. And the last study I wanted to share for today is this ongoing research coming out of Australia. So a bit closer to home, although not quite here yet, but we got opportunity if we want to look here within New Zealand. This is looking across 4 universities, which is also unique to a lot of the current research about student well-being and AI. Largest sample so far, so over 8,000 students. And I've included here a link that just gives about an hour overview of their research, but nice to hear from them as well. And I've just taken some outtakes from one of their one-pagers from a conference where I was looking at feedback. That's something that students are often going for. That's something that we often provide as learning advisors, is feedback. Over half of students were reporting that they do use AI to get feedback. A lot of that motivation, again, is because teachers might not be able to provide that targeted feedback, and they want some personalized instruction. And in a timely way, they could access it anytime, any place, on their phone, after hours, much less restriction. We see some skepticism still, so noting that GenAI is unreliable, and that maybe some of the strength of human tutors is clarity, depth, and kindness. Whereas the student indicated their preference for AI, again, because it's a machine, they don't have to feel embarrassed, and can ask as many questions as they need. And they looked at students' perceptions of helpfulness of GenAI feedback. They did think that teachers and humans provided more helpful feedback and more trustworthy and credible feedback than GenAI. Overall, the benefits for GenAI is that it, again, more accessible, after hours, immediate, whereas human teacher feedback can be more helpful for reflection and some of that metacognition around their learning, more nuanced, contextualized, expert, and valued. And yeah, they scored similarly in being usable and detailed. So just being mindful of time, some of these key takeaways that I hope to share with you today is that it's important for us to center and amplify students' voice, particularly in times of rapid change like this, to make sure that we're able to support them. And any opportunities we can to improve autonomy, choice, and keep their voice in decision-making can be helpful. Their interests mirror those concerns that we have in our roles. as well as some student-specific things like fairness and grading. So those who use AI and copy-paste into 3 units, getting higher grades than those who might not be using it, or the other way around. Fear of intentional or unintentional plagiarism and academic integrity violations. Also, a lot of young people did not like assumptions made about their motivation for AI use, that they just wanted to cheat or take an easy way out. And really, it was more likely that they were dealing with the complex lives that we all have after hours. And yes, some of the job preparedness impacts of AI. So knowing these preferences, I wanted to offer some takeaways about how we can use it in our role. So this is pointing towards the potential gaps that maybe in our human academic support staff roles we can provide and be more helpful and trustworthy. And then, of course, research will continue. It is emerging. And I think that's at my 20-minute mark. I wanted to offer, if there's time for questions or discussion, these were just some points that I had landed on, but I'm happy to open it up for you all to share. So thank you.
There's definitely time for questions, and I might lead that off. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for a really in-depth look at this really important topic. It's interesting because we started off the whole session this morning with an AI topic, and it became an instant buzzword, and we're going to end with that focus again. I did have a question for you. Is there any indication from the research that you've gathered what kind of generative AI apps students are using that has informed them and that they find is useful? Obviously, or it's more like a hopeful thing, students are going with the ones that are recommended by the institutes. But I'd be interested to see if there's a shared generative AI app or one or two that has found usefulness across the institutes.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I feel like that's a new study too, which feels pretty.
Oh no.
Yeah. But I'm thinking back to most of the reading either used the generic term of GenAI, but ChatGPT stuck out to me. I remember seeing it in a few pieces, particularly I think the podcast focused a lot on ChatGPT.
Which spurred on my second question, actually, because we know now that ChatGPT is a creative app, AI app, rather than a study app or one that is appropriate for students to use alongside their language and writing, and can push into, if you're just using the free version, then you're likely to be susceptible to hallucinative information. So I'm wondering if they've got any kind of information that informs us about, I guess, what do we need to be careful of? What are the ones that the students, it's obvious what they've said was really important to them: the usability, the feedback that it provides, the instruction that it can also provide. How do we as learning advisors deal with that, right?
Yeah, and I hope, my hope is that I think we're still early in the stage where young people are learning to use these tools, and if and when and how. And if we can present ourselves as a supportive place for them to ask those questions, that when they want the relationship with the human, they'll still be able to come to us and keep it in mind as, being a tool in their toolkit rather than the only thing that's available to support them.
Can I just mention something about the whole AI thing that really worries me as both as working in academia is the whole idea of collaboration of students working together. I mean, AI seems to be very individual, and this whole way of students learning together, both culturally and for their own good, about hearing other people's comments and stuff like that. I'm not sure they necessarily get that with AI, and it's a real worry that that's actually going to diminish. And it's going to be. I think it'll be a real loss in higher education for this collaboration to happen, both culturally and academically.
Yeah. It did come up in some places talking about it just being the social skill, and framed that way within research, and that it's a job skill as well, if we want to put it in that context. But, yeah, just receiving affirmative, GenAI feedback is an unchallenging, conversation for students rather than learning how to, talk through difference.
Has anyone else got any questions? I mean, I got to ask questions all day because I've got some more questions just popping out left, right, and centre. It's one of those topics that I love to talk about, but I don't want to flood the floor with all my questions. Has anyone else got any questions? Nothing comes to mind. I'm going to ask one more question, Melissa. So, I mean, like most of my peers, I'm sure, we've all been doing a little bit of research into the background. Alongside, it's wonderful to see that you're taking it to the next level, and we'll be anticipating what comes from that and in the future. But I recently had watched a documentary that came out of America where Khan Academy, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with this, has taken on AI as the chosen, and they use this word deliberately, chosen tutor for their students. And they're doing a pilot on this, and it's from what we can see and what they've been saying, they're making choices about how the new AI will be the next thing that students will go to. They interviewed the students. There was a lot of positivity about that, giving reasons why. And these were with young students. These were not with university students. But what is of concern is that that wasn't flagged in that particular documentary, but in another research paper, is that what Jerry indicated, that humanity, that human texture and context and ability to rub skin with others becomes a missing element. And it does actually impinge on the development of the student when they're highly dependent on, in actual fact, it's neurological difficulties are being spoken about in some of the research about this. It's one of those topics that we need to watch in the future. And honestly, you've opened a can of worms for us, Melissa. Thank you very much. Great way to finish that day. But we so appreciate your experience, and please keep us informed on your continued research. We're looking forward to that as we continue undoubtedly in the new year into this space as well.